Does it feel sometimes like modern software project management and the Agile methodology are incompatible with each other? I've experienced those feelings, and I certainly have found myself as an Agile leader at odds with the priorities of the project manager. How do we sort this out? In this video, I'll compare project management with the Agile methodology and talk about ways to achieve synergy rather than cynicism. I have a free download for you that I'll tell you about a little later in the video. But let's begin with a little history. Project management emerged as a profession in the 1960s and was codified with the founding of the Project Management Institute in 1969. This is, of course, well before personal computers, when planning was done either on paper or on very large computer systems, that is, mainframes. Between 1970 and 1995, the vast majority of project management work was focused on physical projects in industries like construction, manufacturing, defense, and aerospace. While digital projects, that is, software, began to emerge, they were far less prevalent than physical projects. When I was at Microsoft in the mid-1990s, we were practicing what is now known as the waterfall method, where one team does their work, then drops it off at the doorstep of the next team. For example, all the software development would be completed before it was handed to the testers. That would be anathema now, but it was quite a common practice well into the 2000s. And of course, the waterfall method of that time would fit quite nicely into existing project management practices. The demands of software development in the mid-1990s started prompting new, more flexible approaches, leading to early Agile concepts and ultimately led to the Agile Manifesto in 2001. Since then, project management practices and the Agile methodology have lived side by side in a rather uneasy partnership. There have been attempts to kind of merge the two, such as the Scaled Agile Framework released in 2011, but that particular approach is more successful with giant corporations who can afford the number of layers of people required to run the framework. The bottom line is that waterfall tends to be sequential, and Agile is iterative. Thus, blending the two can be a bit of a challenge. So in today's software projects, where do project managers and Agile leaders tend to collide? Well, I could write an entire book on this subject, but let's focus on the number one point of friction, the schedule. Though everyone wants to stay on schedule, PMs and Agile leaders come at the schedule from very different viewpoints. Before we continue, let's remember the order in which modern software development occurs. A PM begins a project using project management software that contains a calendar or some kind of timeline, and based on their interviews of stakeholders, product folks, and engineering staff, comes up with their best estimate of the duration of the project. They know it's going to change, but the PM knows they have to at least make seriously educated guesses. The Scrum product owner is focused on translating business requirements into engineering language. They are more focused with features and benefits than timing, though they know there's a preferred timeline to meet. A Scrum Master typically arrives on the project well after the above two parties have done their preliminary work. Working with the engineering staff, the Scrum Master begins breaking down the requirements into achievable segments of work and tracking the tasks. The Scrum Master is focused on making sure those segments of work can be achieved with quality. So already we have concentric circles of concern with points of friction. The project manager keeps a schedule that typically tracks work over weeks and months. They may or may not have a technical background sufficient to follow the details of software development, and thus relies on the Scrum team to supply that information. The Scrum Master's view is detailed and specific, tracked using modern tools like Jira or Azure DevOps. And since the Scrum Master is driving the work, the project manager may come directly to the Scrum Master for schedule updates based on what's happening sprint by sprint. That level of detail is rarely satisfying to the PM because they are operating the schedule at a much higher level. The project manager, probably not getting the high-level view of progress from the Scrum Master, may approach the Scrum product owner for an overview. The Scrum product owner does have that higher level view of blocks of work. Ideally, they check in daily or regularly with the Scrum Master to see whether they're on track in the current sprint and what the next sprint's work will be. That information might satisfy the PM, but still, being rather granular, doesn't answer the PM's question, when will we be done? So, timeline communications appear to be going in circles and no one's getting the answers they need. This is one of the reasons why I created that free download for you, which I'll explain later. What you need to have a project move forward collaboratively is consensus on 1. Who manages or minds the public schedule? 2. Who is going to plan the ongoing work? 3. Who's going to track the ongoing work? 4. When schedule changes will be communicated? And 5. How the updated information will be disseminated. Let's assume we're past the original planning sessions that occurred at the beginning of a project and that the PM manages the published schedule. That takes care of number 1, leaving numbers 2 through 5 for us to discuss. The answer to number 2 is everyone. If your company doesn't already have regularly scheduled planning sessions for everyone who participates in the creation of a product, then that's your next step. If 2 or more teams are interdependent, they need to plan together. Number 3 goes to the Agile Leaders, that is the Scrum Master and the Scrum Product Owner. They are the ones working directly with the development team. Number 4 should happen regularly in a scheduled meeting between the PM and the Agile Leaders. They can agree upon a mutually beneficial meeting cycle, whether that's every week or possibly every other week, depending on when the sprints occur. Number 5 will likely go to the project manager. As the keeper of the schedule, it makes sense for that person to ensure that stakeholders receive the updates on a regular basis. I have an example of how numbers 2 through 5 worked in one of my projects. I led planning several times for a large corporation. This product had 6 teams all working on the same application. Planning was done in layers. High-level priorities were delivered by the stakeholders to the product owners, who as a group divided up the features and identified cross-team dependencies. The Scrum product owners then worked with the development teams to break down the work into shippable components. The concept of having project managers was relatively new to this company. The PMs assigned to my teams operated in parallel on the issue of scheduling and timelines, and thus the back and forth, rather unsatisfying conversations about when we would ship. The solution was to create a planning board from which both the PMs and the Agile Leaders could operate. Initially, for planning purposes, we chose a 4-month time segment, which gave the Scrum team sufficient time to complete the rather complicated features that depended on underlying systems. What I'm about to describe could be construed as a version of planning using the scaled Agile framework, but in our case, we were using regular Agile methods to keep planning lightweight and crisp. While we preferred to get everyone in a room together, the corporate budget didn't always allow for that, so we used video conferencing software with breakout rooms to get the job done. Using a whiteboarding application, we created a set of blocks and rectangles representing a high-level view of the plan. These included an area for collecting the largest blocks of work, that is epics, from which smaller segments, that is features, could be identified. An area for notes on technical debt to be included in the plan. A rectangle for each sprint with a place to note any holidays or planned personal days that would reduce capacity. An area for assumptions, risks, and dependencies. And then horizontal bars representing the individual features being worked on over time. With some whiteboarding applications, you can actually pull in blocks representing work items from your tracking system and place them on the board. We just didn't have that option. We manually created and stretched the horizontal bars as needed. That did give us some flexibility in moving things around. At the end of planning, a presentation was made to stakeholders to obtain their buy-in and approval. Product owners and development teams went on to further break down the work until they reached consensus. Sometimes that happened during the planning event, sometimes the work took longer to complete. Here you can see a sample layout with sticky notes on the left and corresponding features and technical debt on the right laid out across the sprints. The project managers and the Scrum team leaders then met weekly in a Scrum of Scrums to update the visual board. We also addressed risks and dependencies and updated our assumptions as needed. This process gave the project managers visibility into the status of the project from the developer's point of view and helped coordinate the activities of 6 teams all working on the same software. As the work progressed, the horizontal bars were moved, shortened, or stretched by the Agile leaders as appropriate. If work fell off the end of the planned period, we set it aside to cover in the next planning session. We gave both stakeholders and project managers read-only access to the board so they couldn't accidentally, or maybe on purpose, make changes. So the end results were clear delineation of responsibilities, consensus-building planning sessions, regular communications between PMs and Agile leaders, and regular updates to stakeholders on the status of the project. Now, my example can be modified to suit your team. It should give you plenty of ways to improve your team's productivity through collaboration rather than confrontation. Okay, now about my free gift. In preparing for this video, I did a detailed analysis and side-by-side comparison of the Project Management Institute's published principles and the Agile Manifesto, looking for points of synergy. It's a fascinating look at the two systems, and it should help project managers and Agile leaders understand each other even better. You can get your copy of Agile versus Project Management by visiting rsscorporateagile.com. I'll put the link in the description. Be sure to like this video and tap that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when my next video arrives. Thanks.